Jeremy Scott, what's going on, bro? How are you?
Good, man. Happy to be here.
Same, man. Same. First off, bro, congratulations, man. I saw the announcement, just like a ton of other people this past week or two. You and Heather announcing a little one coming into this world. I'm pumped for you guys. You guys are going to be incredible parents, man.
Yeah, here we are on some old dad energy. But yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Was that always part of the plan, or was that something you guys kind of decided a little later on, or like, let's send it? Like, I think that'd be fun.
I could be cool by myself or with or without a kid. I know for some people that's kind of like they know what they want to do. I'm kind of like take things as they come. And for us, just because like she is so independent as a person, as am I. We just like to do our process. And the reality, like the world is different. Like, right, like my parents had kids when they were, I mean, fuck, 22 and like 24. Where I'm not saying you can't do that anymore. Like where I grew up, it's probably still somewhat common, but uh, I'd be naive to tell people the economic environment is the same, the speed of life is the same, and honestly, like there's zero chance, and I mean zero chance that my business and me being this person today exists if I had kids earlier on. Just not that it's bad or good. It's just I would be in a different life and my existence would be something completely different than this. So yeah, for us, it's how it worked out. Like my best friend has four kids and he's on a different journey than me. So yeah, for us, this is kind of like the only way. It's like kind of now or never, really.
Totally, dude. Totally. It's fascinating, man. I mean, I know you can speak to this too, but man, the way you grew up is going to be very different from the way you guys raise your child, right? And the access and just the environment and what's available to us, especially from a technology standpoint. But man, I've had friends like yourself who had kids at 22, 23. And I feel like even, us, when my wife and I hopefully get the opportunity to raise a kid one day, it's like even like 6, 7, 8 years apart, like it's going to be very different. But what are some of like the challenges or the things that you're kind of anticipating or stuff that you've thought about, if you've thought about anything already of like, damn, it's going to be tough to maybe navigate through a kid. And obviously you've never done that before, but just like future forecasting things that you know you are going to kind of have conversations and whatever around with your kid with. Is there anything that comes to mind?
I mean, the two biggest things, like one, the tech moves so fast now. It's I don't even know what it looks like in 5 or 10 years. All our brains can do is go backwards and, kind of reverse engineer what we have seen, but that's not what the future is. Like there's this exponential growth with artificial intelligence, and I don't know how that impacts everything, but it's drastically in terms of job displacement, in terms of school, like the model you used to know, I think is outdated. I've kind of thought that for a long time, but like, why would I sit and have to memorize the presidents when I can look it up on my phone in 15 seconds? Like, and I know there's something to be said about like, taking information, but like just memorizing and regurgitating, I think is a really low level skill now. So like those quote unquote IQ or like hard skills, I don't think are as valuable. It's more the soft skill stuff. And then secondly, like I grew up without much money, just enough to kind of get by in a different place where nobody, drove a Mercedes. Nobody drove a BMW. And where I live now, a BMW is like a Ford Taurus. Like it's the base level, I don't mean this negatively, but kind of like your basic shit car. And you got 16-year-old kids driving $100,000 cars here, and that's like on the regular. So if you have a kid here, they're never going to know your struggle because you're not going to go back and live your old life. So it's like, can you raise them to not be a shithead, in an environment where it's really a microeconomy of the world? Because what this is not real here. Like when I go home or when I travel to other places, it's drastically different. But if you only grow up and know this, that kind of becomes your baseline. It's like the example I give is imagine you grew up flying on a private jet and then you become an adult and you got to fly like Southwest seat, B58. Like it's a pretty big difference. I did the reverse. Like I flew the shitty flights and then the first class stuff kind of later. So that's something you kind of have to navigate, I'm assuming, as a parent, which will be a challenge for sure.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know, I will introduce Jeremy Scott here in a second. We've kind of got on a little side tangent, but Jeremy's somebody who drove a fucking Honda Civic or whatever, right? For hundreds of thousands of miles, you guys live in beautiful Scottsdale, Arizona. My wife went to school in Glendale, Arizona, so we spent a lot of time in Scottsdale, and it's probably
Mm.
one of our favorite cities, especially this time of the year, October. Like it's starting to become like prime time weather and season down there. I don't know how you guys do that shit in the summer though, but like the 120s for 3 straight months are just that's a whole kind of fucked up. But man, I guess the opposite, is kind of worth it for the quote unquote like the on season down there. But man, seeing you and seeing meeting Heather one time and like it's just fascinating. That's why I appreciate you. And that's why I wanted to get you on the show. Is just your perspective is very different. Somebody from the Midwest, and your brain is just a little bit different. It's built a little bit different. You see those people in the online space, especially health and fitness coaches, but you don't see it very often. More often than not now, you see the business coaches, you see the people flashing the cars like you're talking about, you see the people saying, oh, I made this amount of money, or I got this many clients in this month. And that's kind of what health coaches, dietitians, people are kind of exposed to when it comes to online coaching these days. So it's just really refreshing to kind of have your standpoint on a lot of these things, which really are going to be the basis of a lot of the questions we go over today. But yeah, I want to do a little intro for you before you give your little intro as well. I like to give an intro for all the guests that I have on the show. You're somebody that I would say is a little bit more unique and like special to my personal story. I've been trained as a dietitian, been through all the school, masters, all that good stuff, worked full time in some clinical and acute, just settings in the nutrition world, hospitals, dialysis clinics, all that good stuff. I found you and I started listening to your podcast back, I think in 2018 or 2019, around the time that you kind of started. I think you have like fucking almost 1,000 episodes now, but like I remember kind of being with you kind of before 50, 100 episodes were even dropped. And listening to a lot of the things that you kind of were preaching back at the time, which is like, bro, if I could do it, you could do it. And like, this is the best time to ever do something if you wanted to start your own business, and not starting your own business and working for somebody else, or kind of creating your life around somebody else's dream ain't it for a lot of people. And I really resonated with that. And that kind of built the confidence and just kind of strengthened some of the mental muscles that I needed strengthened at the time to be able to start seeing clients on the side, to eventually turn that into a full-time business. And now I sit here 3, 4 years later. I've been by myself for the last 4 years, and I wouldn't change a thing, right? But I attribute a lot of the mindset shifts that I had in that beginning to start thinking that way because of your podcast, because of some of your programs, because of, some of the fitness stuff that I invested into you for. And so having this come full circle is just, it's kind of cool for me. And I know this episode is going to be really just a really fun one at the end of the day too. But that's Jeremy Scott to me. You're somebody who's been important, and I would attribute a lot of, just the cool success that I had in the very beginning. I don't think it would have been made possible if I didn't listen to a lot of your messaging early on. So I thank you for that. I don't think I've ever actually had a chance to thank you for that. Not that you need it, but now my question to you is, how do you describe Jeremy Scott to somebody? like how do you sit here today and say, yeah, this is my podcast introduction to myself? Because I find that to be very difficult, even for someone like me, where it's like, oh, you work in fitness or you're a personal trainer. It's like, man, like, yeah, I do all those things, but I'm not what you think I am, because there's kind of a perception of what a personal trainer, what somebody who posts shirtless content on Instagram is like, but that's not what Jeremy Scott is. So I'm curious of like how you conceptualize and explain that to people, if you even do in the first place.
Yeah. First, thank you. I appreciate it. You know, it's the one thing my wife probably cringes the most about when we meet people or go somewhere to try to like kind of explain it, which that comes from, something in your youth that you were programmed and kind of taught like, hey, we work this job, this is our job title, and then we meet somebody and they tell us we associate the job title with an education level, we associate the education level with a certain amount of income, a certain amount of success and prestige and whatever it may be. And I'm not saying I never did that, but you meet so many people in this life, especially with the in-person stuff, and then obviously the internet, it's exponential growth. I meet doctors, lawyers, scientists, construction workers, you name it. And what I've learned is like it really doesn't matter what the job title is. It really doesn't matter what the income level is. And oftentimes you are so confused about what those two things actually mean. And the freedom and the happiness and the stress level of that person is not directly correlated to the title or the money. So I guess if I looked at like my LinkedIn banner, because they all kind of match, it's like says like entrepreneur, fitness coach, podcast, or whatever the fuck any of that even means. At the end of the day, like I am a fitness person. Like I was an athlete forever, and this is the closest thing I could do to, essentially play professional sports. And that's where this all was birthed from. And the success from it just comes from, I mean, the only talent I have is I will work my fucking ass off. Like that's the one thing I will do. There's not a lot of people, and this is not a brag, like that are going to get up like me every day, as old as I am, as much money as I have, and do the fucking shit that I'm willing to do. Most people will not, but I enjoy a majority of it. And a majority of it is kind of birthed around things that I'm good at and things that I enjoy, which is the fitness stuff. I'm just lucky enough to have met like the right people at the right time to understand like how to write sales copy, to understand email marketing, to understand like how a business runs both in person and online. And you kind of hit that sweet spot on the internet of we can use these tools of social media to reach a lot of people and help a lot of people and get in front of a lot of faces, but I also don't take like, you know, pride in that. If people say, "Hey, I'm awesome," or say I suck, it doesn't affect me because my self-confidence was built, decades before that existed. So it's really tough to say. Like I am a fitness person deep down, but obviously, where does the money come from? Like I guess it's fitness now, but it's like we have a podcast and sometimes we talk about shit that has nothing to do with fitness whatsoever. So my take for people is like people buy you at the end of the day. And if you can like be a good person and you can help people and whatever that is, like you can be a linchpin in any organization, whether it's your own or somebody else's. So I guess like I am an entrepreneur, I guess would be the title, but it's all birthed in fitness because that's the thing I really do love to do.
For sure, man. When I was investing in kind of starting my own business, and I invested into some mentorship, and I was part of like a mastermind group, and just with a bunch of other people who were doing similar things as me, learning back end systems, like building a presence on social media, building a brand, building just like a business in general, like trying to get and acquire clients, like all the stuff that you did, right? When you started this journey, however many years ago that was. And there was a lot of different types of like messages that mentors or people online, were kind of saying on how you can acquire clients, for example. And a lot of it I found to me was like adjusting my mentality, adjusting my messaging for what I thought other people wanted to hear. And when you say like, people are buying you, they're buying a service, but they're buying you first and foremost. Like I couldn't agree more with that, because when I found more success and just more happiness in my business after that first year or two, yeah, I was able to make it. I was able to pay the bills. I didn't have to rely on, another company to pay me to for me to do my shit. But when I finally found success in my business, when I finally started to like embrace what I give a fuck about talking about, or what I wanted to communicate with people, or talk about what I think is important and talk in a way that I wanted to talk. And that's one thing I really admire about you. And again, it's very refreshing in a space where people kind of are telling you or pointing people in the direction of like how you can get clients, how you can stay in the, successful in the online coaching space. Cause it's very saturated, but it's not saturated with a ton of great coaches I've found. And when you start to embody like who you are, what you talk about, what you give a fuck about, I find that you naturally attract people that want to work with you for those reasons, instead of you trying to be somebody else you're not and trying to speak someone else's language in the hopes that they find interest in you and then they invest into you. So for me, I personally found, and again, with the help of your podcast and other opinions and me just like flipping that switch of like, I'm not here to do this shit for anybody else. Like I want to help and serve people in my own way. And I'm not going to change that because I think somebody else wants to hear a certain thing, or they don't want to hear me swear on Instagram or on my podcast. Right. So I think for you, it's cool to see somebody do that and be so successful in that, because it's not that you have a blueprint, but you just show that can be done. And people, I think, appreciate that more or not. I think in a day now where online coaching, it was very, very high and at its peak a few years ago. And now I think you see this downhill swing of like people aren't in this business anymore because they weren't able to make it. But I think the ones who have been able to make it and who have been successful are the people that stay true to themselves. They talk about what they want to talk about. They don't change themselves for other people. And I think that that's kind of the secret sauce that I found for me personally, something that I've learned from you of like how you can stay in this shit for a long time, which is the same with health and fitness. Like, how can we create something that keeps people showing up, that keep people interested, that keep them investing into themselves over their lifespan. It's very similar with health and fitness, but I found with business related stuff, everything for me switched when I started to embody that. And it's a lot easier said than done, but it was scary at first, but I'm grateful for that. But I see that in you a lot. And I want to give you some praise for doing that too, because you're just unapologetically yourself. And I think that can rub people the wrong way sometimes, but more often than not, I think just builds, appreciation for people. Like, I know what I'm getting when I go see Jeremy in the studio, and I know how he's going to talk, and I know what workouts we might do, and I know what messages he's going to say. So I think all of those things are why you've been so successful. And it's just been fun to watch that from a distance for me, at least.
Yeah, I mean, for anybody, I would say you just have to be who you are. I couldn't imagine, like, if you're trying to be something you're not for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, it's a race you guys can't run. You're going to get tired unless you are like a legit actor, like you're Denzel and you show up on set and you can put on a show, but then you have to be able to turn it off and turn it back on. And most of you listening are not Denzel. Like, so we're not good enough to do that. So you have to be who you are. And so if I talk a certain way on the internet or in person, I want the messaging, I guess, to be true. So if I pretend I'm like Jeremy on, Fox News or CNN News and I'm speaking in a certain way, and then you come here and we're playing Tupac and every other word is fuck, and like people here are saying inappropriate things, like you're going to get a different vibe from us. Like I want you, like, this is like, imagine we're having a beer at the bar and we're friends for 15 years. That's how I talk on the podcast. That's how I talk to our people here. And that's the kind of environment I want to work in, because I don't want to show up to work and like feel like I have to be something else and dread coming to work. And that would be my hope for anybody else, is where you can actually, within reason, be yourself most of the time. Because that's the only way it's going to be sustainable for the long haul. And again, like if you think about your business or even your career, like it would be exhausting waking up every day, putting on a mask and like dreading, is today the day I get fired? Is today the day I get canceled because I say something that, so and so doesn't like? It's like, that's a game I can't play.
Yeah, totally, man. Totally. And I'm kind of looking at my notes and what I want to talk to you about today. And one of them is kind of this overarching concept of like dealing with criticism, dealing with judgment, like external criticism, right? Like a lot of us, we can be our own biggest critics at the end of the day too, but a lot of us can struggle with like external, criticism, whether it's constructive or not, right? Or whether it's just trolls on Instagram fucking saying you look stupid or don't have any legs. It's like all of it can kind of feel the same, but relating it to business in a sense, because you started online coaching, you were kind of in the space, I would say, probably before it was cool, right? Like if we're being real, like in using Facebook groups and being on Instagram and growing your platform, like you did it before people thought it was easy, right? And just kind of started to do that as their side hustle, which again, not to say that that can't be done. And we have an opportunity to do that these days. But I imagine when you started, and especially in your kind of, age group, not that you're fucking 50 years old, right? But just like that was something that I feel like was very foreign. Like for me, when I say I have an online business and I'm on Instagram, it's like, oh yeah, cool. Yeah. A lot of people do. But I feel like you were part of the generation where like people who did that, who didn't have a corporate job, who weren't using their education, were like kind of these like woo woo people. It's like, okay, good luck, bro. Yeah, we'll see how that plays out in fucking 10 years. But I'm curious if you got any judgment or criticism, whether it was from like close friends or family or just people online. Like, how did you handle that in the beginning? Has that changed at all? Have you always had that kind of like those mental muscles to be able to like, in intake that information and then don't use it or use what you want from it and then throw away the rest? Like, how did that kind of express itself in the beginning? And has that changed as social media and as if you've gotten more popular and as you work with more people? Like, how do you deal with criticism, or how did you start doing that? Because I imagine it was very different than what it looks like even today.
Yeah, it's a different space now than it was obviously way back then. Like back in the day, if you said like I'm an entrepreneur, people were like, "That what does that even mean?" And now it's everybody and their brother pretends to be one, which is a very hard thing to do. It's very few people make it the duration. When we started doing this, and maybe it's different in our instance because like this whole business started off of what I look like, and that's not the route I would tell people to go, but I was, a young man like in muscle and fitness and on bodybuilding.com and on Livestrong and working with Men's Health. And So all of our branding was like me shirtless, and it's for what it's worth. In fitness, it is a super easy buy-in. It doesn't mean the person fucking knows anything, other than how to be in shape and eat well and have good genetics and all the things. So I remember like when we started the site in general and had the first, because there was no Instagram at the time. YouTube is barely there, and you're not even getting paid for the YouTube ads because Google hasn't picked them up yet. Like we would put our stuff on Facebook, and there's people who I was friends with in high school or college and I didn't notice at the time, like retroactively would tell us like we would like talk shit about you and like laugh that like you're doing this as a business. Like what a joke. Like we're working at, Bank of America making $56,000 a year and you're doing like shirtless photo shoots and doing whatever. I'm like, but yeah, that was my path. For me personally, like my self-confidence was already there as an adult, like through sports. And when you play sports, you realize there's people that are better than you and there's people who aren't as good as you. And probably one of the fairest things there are, and fitness is the same way. And if I put a lot of time into something, like if it's, let's say, my physical body, I'm going to train and eat a certain way to look a certain way. When I show up, this is the best it can be. And if you're like this, you look like shit and your business is dumb. I'm like, I know what I put into it. And I know what I'm doing. And on the surface, we call it like sizzle and steak. So we do the shirtless bullshit because it gets people to stop scrolling and they click, and that's the buy-in. Without getting somebody to open up the email, clickbait, if you will, and having a catchy title, it doesn't matter how good your shit is if nobody can see it. It's called fucking marketing, dude. It's why it exists. Everybody knows what Coca-Cola is, yet they put out an ad every single day to be on top of mind. And that's what we did. I'm like, if I can use this as the hook, then once you come into the queue, I can sell you like what I want. So we always knew it was more than just that. And it's hard, but it's hard to sell people that. Like, hey, let me sell you on, hey, you're going to have to change the way that you train and sleep and eat. And oh, by the way, you're going to have to do it for the next, I don't know, 50 years or however long you're alive. Like, that's not a sellable thing. So anybody who like from the outside talks shit about it, you don't really understand the business of it for that. And I give him a pass because it's like it does. Like you play into the stereotype. If I get all pumped up and I go to the grocery store today and I'm wearing like a wife beater, yeah, I look like some dude who's a fucking complete meathead, all, juiced up. And that's not wrong if you think that of me. I go, but there is much more than that, like there is of anybody else. So the one thing I will say, like, because we've been on the biggest platforms and your brain is not equipped to hear the amount of praise you get. So like when Men's Health is at its peak and we're doing a video and that video gets 12 million views, I probably have 11.5 million people telling me I'm fucking awesome. But I also have half a million people telling me I suck shit. Your brain is not equipped to see either of those two things. And what you have to realize is one, people are going to judge you no matter what. That's just life in the world. But at the end of the day, like I've never in my life ever like talked shit about anybody or commented on their stuff or said it sucked ever because nobody who's doing well does those things. These are people who have like something going on in their life. And so I tend to give them a pass for that. And it's also not reality. Like when you go to the grocery store, you go to the bank, people aren't going to talk shit to you. It's this weird kind of keyboard warrior thing. And you have to just let it go. And no, to be honest with you, when people are really talking shit about you, because sometimes we post stuff and podcasts and things where people are like, Jeremy, you fucking suck. We hate you. And it's like, you're choosing to follow my life and my business and what we do. I don't even know who you are. And you're choosing to like be part of our stuff. So if you're not getting any of that, you're not even reaching like, I guess, a big enough audience. And so just take kind of like the people who kind of hate on your stuff as like it's a good problem because nobody hates on average people. They hate on the great ones. And it's kind of like it's almost like a compliment to you.
Yeah, totally. Well said, dude. And I think if I took one thing from that, it's like, man, you have to have and have to do the internal work to be able to like at least from a bird's eye view, see like, okay, where is this input coming from? Who is saying it? In what capacity are they saying it? On what level are they saying it? Like, what is factually true or what's not true? Because I think, and again, you having a larger audience, you might get more exposure to that. I don't get that very often, for example, but I'll post something on Threads, nutrition related, and then I'll get people, even like this last week, just like going in on it. And you have this like conversation with this person where you realize like that's going to be a losing battle, not in the sense that like I'm trying to change this person's mind, but it's like the energy and where I have to go to be able to respond in a like articulate way, in a way that's respectful when they aren't doing the same. Like, those people are fucking dementors and like and if they are actually even real people at the end of the day, like sometimes I think like who the fuck in their
True.
right mind would actually say this shit, right? Um, but man, you got to be able to just appreciate that like that can come with putting yourself out there. And I think I'm speaking to like content creators right now, in addition to people who are just working on better health, better body composition, like want to look better naked. Like I think the same principles apply, but man, a lot of internal work has to go into that. You might not be free from all the comments and all the judgments or all the random shit that Aunt Susie might say to you at fucking Christmas coming up. But at the end of the day, it's like, man, you doing this for yourself, you appreciating like what process and what habits and what things you're instilling to make you a better person. Like if you could be at peace with that and you're not doing all this shit for everybody else, I found for me at least that's made it easier to like let the shit roll off my shoulders a little bit more. Not to say I'm perfect at it, but I don't take things to heart like I used to, right? And I think that's more of an internal kind of like problem and solution that people need to find instead of like trying to live in fucking bubble wrap and expecting all perfect roses, cool comments in the future as they start to expand and as they start to get more fit, because there's always going to be a different level of people that you might be exposed to at whatever level you're at. And I think in a world today, I think criticism, I think people are feel more comfortable than ever, like talking shit to people or going at people's character or the way they look, just kind of not to make this political, but like kind of the political environment. Like there's a lot of stuff that's very polarizing. It's very polarizing in health and fitness as well, right? And the way people look and how they talk and how they speak and what they say and what's important to them. Like those are all things that people look at and they're like, oh, this is ammunition for me to like be my fucking Twitter finger kind of in their DMs kind of thing. And I think if you as the person can't handle that or haven't done the internal work, like that shit's gonna fuck with you more than it's not. So I don't know. I think that that's something that I've personally tapped into a little bit more. And I think the common theme today is like, man, you got to do the internal work and you got to be really like at peace with who you are and how you show up for yourself. And you got to know what you do this for, because that kind of stuff won't fuck with you as much as it can.
No, for you guys, if you do create stuff, like in my opinion, any comments are good comments, you know. You just have to know how to take them. Like if you're gonna pray for rain, you got to deal with the mud too. That's really like what social media is. And the last piece of advice I'd give you is like I would never take criticism from people I wouldn't take advice from. You know what I'm saying? Like you sometimes you listen to this horse shit from somebody like you wouldn't listen to anything else they say. But your brain is naturally wired to kind of look for the negative stuff. So if you have 1,000 comments and one of them's negative, most people tend to dwell on the one negative thing. And you really have to just kind of change your mind and know like, hey man, like how I describe it is like some people don't like drinking beer. Like some people don't like cinnamon rolls. Some people don't like the beach. Some people don't like having sex. Like if you, I mean, those are like universally fucking awesome things. And so if there's people who hate on those things, they're gonna hate your shit that you put out. Like just know it comes with the territory and just kind of keep it rolling, man.
Totally, dude. Totally. And I think in like the world of criticism and judgment and just comments, especially like unsolicited comments and just like, constructive or destructive criticism that people might be giving you, I think as much as that exists, also the comparison and people wanting to be like you and people aspiring to be like you or people comparing what they have to your shit. Maybe not Jeremy Scott or maybe not, myself, but in general, man, comparison is something I think a lot of people are always doing. And social media has kind of cultivated this environment that's made that very common. It's made it very easy. It's very accessible. And it's something that I've been guilty of in the past before as well. And you're somebody who I think you had a podcast on it back in the day, and I've seen you talk about it multiple times. But this whole, I forget who quoted it, but comparison is a thief of joy. I think deep down, everybody can nod their head and be like, yeah, of course, comparing yourself to other people is just a one-way ticket to feeling shitty about everything that you have right now, because there's always something or somebody with a different physique that can make your physique look quote unquote less than or yours worse than what they have. And I think deep down, all of us know that that's shitty, but I think it's something that's very difficult to catch yourself in the moment doing and, um, you know, allowing that to happen and then dealing with the repercussions is usually how people can kind of learn from some of those things. And whether people do that for a month or 10 years of their life, everybody at some level is comparing themselves to other things. And I want to relate this to fitness and health and fitness, because I think you and I can both agree and will make the argument that comparison is the thief of joy. Like comparing yourself to other people is fucking stupid, right? It's kind of a lose-lose in a lot of situations. And it's usually going to take you to a place where you feel inadequate or you feel like you don't have enough or you'll be happy when BS that a lot of people can kind of fall into. But for me, and again, I think this is kind of the discussion I want to have around is like, is there any opportunity that comparison can be helpful? Is there ways that people can use it for good? If it's not something that's going to go away completely, if people's innate ability to just be like, oh yeah, this is what I have, this is what I have, is there a way that I can use that for good? And I want to give myself as an example here. And you've kind of alluded to, right? Bodybuilder, fucking Men's Health magazine, like a lot of platforms. I think I stumbled across your Instagram. And of course, I probably saw you doing fucking skiers, right? Or some burpees, or it's like, damn, Jeremy Scott's fucking shredded. I want to look like that one day. So if I want to look like that, I probably have to do what that person is doing, right? And so I think that had some like layers of like why I wanted to invest into you or why I started following you or why I gave you some of my attention. But it was that comparison at the beginning, or it was like, wow, what do I look like right now? And how does this person look like? And like, I think life would be so much better if I looked like fucking Jeremy Scott and I had super visible abs and super good vascularity, and like life would be really good like that. And I think that was start of a pursuit of like, hey, I'm going to track macros, right? Or I'm going to start to train a little bit harder. I'm going to start doing different style of training. And it kind of got me in a path where maybe if I follow that path, like I never and I will never look like you. I will never look like anybody else, right? Like I can only tap into what my full potential is. But it was the comparison in the very beginning, whether it was good or bad. And I realized after the fact that that was something that was not healthy for me, but I've been able to use it for good. But I found that comparing myself to you or comparing myself to other people, it sparked this motivation in me to actually make a change. And for me, the act of doing that actually got me on a track where I started to show up more consistently and I wanted something. And whether I wanted that or not, I found out later on down the road, like if that was something that was actually worth it to me. But it was the initiation of me comparing myself to somebody else where I was like, yeah, like this is something that is helping me. And 2, 3, 4, 5 years later now, it's like, yeah, I appreciate the fact that I'll never look like Jeremy. I'll never look like anybody else. I've done my own version of cutting and bulking and, doing the photo shoots and all that fun stuff too. But I've done that for myself. And I've found that like I've been able to use comparison in a lot of areas of my life for good. And I'm curious if you've ever had that experience or when you have people who were to ask you like, hey, is comparison ever a good thing at the end of the day? Like, what would your response be when overwhelmingly, I know you and I both would argue like comparing yourself to who you were yesterday is probably the best thing that you could do. Like who you were 20 years ago, not a fair comparison, but like comparing yourself to other people it's a slippery slope. It's a very dangerous place for people to be in. But that's a very long-winded way of asking you of like, have you ever used comparison in your life to become a better person, whether it was intentional in that way in the beginning or not? And how would you sit here and say, hey, I want to look like Jeremy Scott one day? Like what words would you give to that person? And how could you kind of like help them conceptualize like how they can use comparison for good in some of these situations?
Yeah, I mean, I look at it, I mean, maybe the terminology is different. Like, because comparing is like a direct me to you in the moment in time. And people do that, and that's where I think you get hung up because we don't all start at the same place. And if it's like your body specifically, you don't have the same genetics for one. Age range training is real for two. What you did from ages like 6 till, honestly, 20 really, really fucking matters. There's just certain things you can't make up time for. And sometimes like you win the lottery, you know. I was never going to be LeBron James. The dude's 6'9", 260, like jumps off a fucking trampoline. Like I can compare all I want. I go, but it's apples to, bananas really at that point. What it really is when you can look at something and not so much compare, but the inspiration in the moment. And I think a lot of us in fitness did that at some point. It could have been your mom and dad. Like for me, I grew up obviously on the deep 80s, early 90s kick. So you're talking like Arnold, you're talking Rocky, you're talking Dolph Lundgren, you're talking Jean-Claude Van Damme, like G.I. Joe, fucking He-Man. Like that's the really probably why my brain is so warped the way it is. And not that I would sit and compare because I'm 12 years old, but and as you get older, you're like, I'm gonna, look like this guy. And then if it's bodybuilding specific, because I've met a lot of these guys and we've traveled around the country with them, like the Jay Cutlers and the Dexter Jacksons of the world. These dudes are 5'8", 5'9". I'm 6'2" and I have a 6'5" wingspan. Like genetically, like I can still dunk a basketball. These guys could never do that. But again, they're, 300 pounds at 5'8". Like it's not a comparison thing, but I can look at them and draw like inspiration from not to want to look like that. I go, but from the work ethic and the practice that goes behind it. And that's pretty much what I've done with fitness and business in general. Like when I'm young, there's not a lot of people doing the stuff I want to do. And I've said this before on different pods, probably like I see like Tyler English back in the day out in Connecticut has this great place and nobody's fucking doing it. And I looked at it and I'm like, how does this fucking guy have this awesome gym, this awesome warehouse? And he's just a little bit older than me. Obviously, nowhere Connecticut is significantly cheaper than Scottsdale. So like again, but I don't look at it like I'm going to compare. I'm like, he's there today. And that's something I can strive to if that's something I want to do. But also know every time you do that, if you can actually talk to the person, like if you could talk to me and say, hey, Jeremy, what is it really like eating the way you eat every day, waking up when you wake up, training the way you train, working around injuries, training through injuries genetically, like what have you done, in terms of sports? Like when you know the full picture, that's when it becomes real. And the only reason I don't do it is because I've done this career for so long and I've worked with people who legitimately make millions of dollars a year. Not somebody who makes 600K a year, dudes who make multiple $1 million a year. And you meet them and you see their stress level and you see what they go through and you see how they're wired. And I'm like, you know what? Like, I want to make a lot of money, but that's what they're doing is too much for me. And so that's like where kind of how I gauge things. And when you look at the guys here that we have, like guys who are Ironmen here, and they're legit Ironmen, like they're fucking savages. I'm like, yeah, I like to exercise, but I don't want to exercise 6 hours a day. So like that's not something I want to do. But I can take the pieces from that and be inspired by it and apply it to my own life in the way that fits me. And I think that's for everybody listening. Like when you see somebody it's not that you're comparing, well, you can draw inspiration from anybody and you can take the best pieces of their life and apply it to your life, but just know you probably don't want to live their exact same life and do exactly the same thing that they're doing every single day. And not even take into account your wife, your kids, all the things that you have going on that really that is a I don't want to say it's an anchor, but it's a responsibility you have that some of us like myself maybe don't have or we have it a little bit easier on that front.
Yeah, dude. Well said. I think the whole like changing the word from comparison to like inspiration, I think could be super helpful. I think that's something that I've definitely been able to like uh change that verbiage and just be able to look at things in a different way, look at things in a productive way instead of like a self-destructing way. And I think a lot of people, if they take anything from this podcast, it's like, yeah, not comparing what you have to somebody else's in a way of like, I wish I had their stuff. I'll be happy when, or, oh, it must be nice fucking people out there. It's one of my biggest pet peeves when, fuck, dude, in reality, man, like a lot of people, if we looked at Jeremy Scott's day, like most people would fucking hate the life that you live, right? They wouldn't trade that for the world, but they see the Instagram posts and they're like, oh, like that would be nice too, though, you know? So I think it comes down to a lot of things. It's about being honest with yourself. It's about seeing what's actually practical for you. It's about setting goals that you actually want, not what society or, what actors or whatever people have done for themselves, which again, we could go into the nuances of like, oh yeah, fucking Sylvester training for Rocky, like man, he didn't look like that year round, like there's a reason people show up and they're in character. There's a reason Jeremy Scott, when he shows up to Men's Health magazine, it's like you probably don't look like how you look in that moment for 365 days in the year. In fact, I know you don't. And you still look great, but it's one of those things where, man, the reality versus like, what we think is true is so far off. It's so different. I don't think people can really comprehend that very well. So I think just like understanding that there's a lot of stuff that goes into us and what's the practicality of some of these things and doing it for yourself. Like, man, that's how people can actually start to make meaningful progressions to a place where they're going to feel happy with and content with and actually proud of the progress that they see instead of always feeling like there's always something else I could or should be doing and I'd be happier then. It's like, man, we all know at the end of the day that that's dumb as fuck and that's a waste of time. And we don't have that much time to be able to spend towards our health and fitness throughout the course of the week, let alone do we have to live. So like wasting these fucks on things that aren't actually giving you value is it's just something that I want people to remember. And it's something that I've definitely instilled within me and my mindset as I've started business and as I've started with my own health and fitness pursuits too.
Well, and the origin story matters, I think, for everybody, and most people aren't willing to share that. I don't like to come on like my podcast or like on the internet and just sound like a whiny bitch because I'm choosing to do all these things. But the reality is like, and this is how we phrase it, like I've had to die 10 times to be here. And most people don't want to do that. And I don't think it's necessary for you in your life. And the timing of things matters too. Like if it's like, let's say business, right? Like I sit in this building, we own this building now, and people look at that from afar. It's like, well, Jeremy, you own all your shit, and it's like it's super impressive. I go, but if I had to buy it all again today, there's no fucking way, dude. Like it's too expensive. Like you're talking multiple millions of dollars when I was buying it for hundreds of thousands. And so when you're comparing, yeah, I guess what could you do when you were in, ninth grade? I was buying real estate, like I don't know what do you call it? Fucking luck? Like, yeah, I was ready when the time came, but I was just born in this time. I graduated college in this time. I saved enough money at this time. I met the right people. Like that's when I don't like comparing things and stuff like that because it's just we're not all playing the same game. When I work with like younger people, especially when they look at like clients of ours that are super successful financially, they'll say, "Oh, I want to do that." I'm like, "Well, they were buying real estate like it's like the equivalent of they were playing in the NBA against Bob Cousy and you guys are playing against LeBron, dude. It's way harder. And for some people, if you don't love fitness, like you don't love to like today we worked out this morning. We did this fucking awful workout. I mean, it's just terrible. Everybody here loves it. I do it with them. Most of you on your Sunday morning in your 40s don't want to do that. I go, but that's what I do. Like that's kind of the price you pay to be here in this game. And so I always tell people when you look at stuff, whether it's the amount of money people make or how fit they are, what they drive, ask them like what they really do. Like what's their day-to-day life like? Because for me, the ultimate is how is your week, your day, your month, your life constructed? That's the biggest thing. Like how much freedom do you have? How much stress do you take on? Like, and do you enjoy the things you're doing? If you love fitness and you want to live in the gym, then sure, I go, but just know you have to do it for you because, and I mean this, nobody gives a shit, you guys, if you have abs or you don't have abs. If you care, that's cool. Your husband or wife didn't marry you just because you did or didn't have them. It doesn't matter. And at the end of the day, like if you work in insurance or you work for the hotels, like it's not part of what you do. Like, is the juice worth the squeeze? Is what we always say for people. So, and understand like if it's like the fitness stuff, and you look at people like me, this is what we do for a living. This is how we make money. And if you sell real estate, I don't think your shoulders have to look like my shoulders. Like I'm not good at your job. Like I couldn't master your job just like you can't master ours. And that's the easiest way I can probably put it.
Totally, dude. Yeah. I think the question you asked and that everyone can kind of resonate with is like, what does this person's day-to-day life look like, and whether you're trying to embody somebody's, business career or, what kind of work they're in or what their body and their physique look like, or, what training program they're doing, what their nutrition is. It's like, at the end of the day, man, you got to find a way to make this match your life instead of completely picking up and uprooting your life to fit into this other box that you may or may not like. And most often than not, like you're probably not going to like, or it's not actually practical for you at the end of the day. But I love that you bring up kind of these like, I like to call them just like non-modifiable risk factors, right? Or just like non-modifiable things that influence the success, the likelihood, the ability to do certain things. And if we look from like from an objective standpoint of like what the market is doing or what resources you have, or what the housing crisis or market looks like right now, and what timing you had, and when you graduated, and when you were looking for some of these jobs, like of course timing, like some of those things you just can't control, right? Like we didn't pick to be 18 years old when whatever happened and all of a sudden it's like everything fell into place. It's like, man, you got to be ready when that shit does happen if you get those opportunities. But man, you don't have control over that. And when I relate it to health and fitness, a lot of times, and somebody might ask you of like, Jeremy, like, what do you eat or what do you do or how do you train? Like, what does it look like to like maintain or to get to a physique that way or to be able to maintain that over your lifespan? And I think there's a lot of things that people can tangibly do to improve their physique, to improve their health, to improve their blood marker. But again, there's these non-modifiable things or these like things that not everybody's playing with the same hand, right? Like favorable genetics being one of them, right? A huge one.
Huge.
and there's a lot of genetic factors that go into this. Like some people might be hungrier at baseline than other people. Other people might not get as full after meals. Some people, their body's ability to upregulate or downregulate their metabolism in response to how much food they're eating, and maybe they don't gain weight because of it, right? Or what muscle definition or origin in insertion points of your biceps, right? Like there's all these things that you do not have control over, right? The other thing is kind of like your environment we talked about, but like even just like your upbringing at some level too, right? Like that can skew this scale in so many different directions. And for me, just talking about me personally, because I've been very blessed and fortunate, and I've spoken about that and I've practiced gratitude for it all the time. But like I was raised in a family that prioritized mostly whole foods. My mom cooked dinner most nights. We ate most meals together as a family at the end of the day. My mom made lunches for me as I went to high school and middle school and all these things. I was always put into sports, things that I wanted. I had control over what I wanted to do. They paid for lessons, right? Like I got to participate in these things on my own doing. And for all those reasons, like my life looks very different now because I was shown or I was brought up in a family that cared about those things, that did those things versus somebody who maybe has divorced parents or comes from a broken family or who didn't have the same access to resources, who doesn't have the same favorable genetics, who lived in different neighborhoods. It's like, man, those two comparisons are not fair comparisons at the end of the day. But oftentimes, like you'll see a lot of these people who make it in the health and fitness space, right? Maybe they had more money, or maybe they didn't have to eat shit as much as somebody else, like, Jeremy Scott when he was in the beginning. You made it obviously, but man, there's so many things that go into it that you don't know as the consumer, as the person coming across this person's page or listening to this podcast, that people aren't willing to be honest with you about. And they'll go and sit up there and be like, oh yeah, I avoid seed oils at all costs. And I never eat sugar. And I only eat protein and vegetables. And I really control my calories and I track my macros and I lift 4 times a week and I get 10,000 steps a day. It's like, sure. Yeah. Those are all things I think people can tangibly do, but the expectation that you can look exactly like somebody else or be in the same position as somebody else in 5 years of doing the same thing that they're doing, man, you're going to be in two very different places. And I think you alluding to this fact that like people are on different starting points, I think that's really helpful to just kind of conceptualize and remember at the end of the day, because it's not an apples to apples comparison for everybody.
Now we literally just talked about this after this workout in here. We got a bunch of savages, but they're normal guys, right? And so one of the dudes, he's like 47, he's a CFO. He is like ending his second marriage at this point. He's like paying for a house that he's not living in. Like his stress level is like 1,000. And but he's an Iron Man. And so he has a lot of darkness to pull from on these workouts. And he still has like the one of the bike erg records here in our house. And there's another kid who's 30, was on SEAL teams, is all juiced up, like just super fucking fit. And he can't beat our 47-year-old guy who's been through multiple marriages and his stress level's 1,000. And he goes, I take pride in that I can still beat this kid. He goes, because the shit I'm carrying with me every single day is so much. And like we joke, and it's funny because we all have a laugh about it because he's very open with his life. But that is true because we kind of look at it as like, well, you're taking advice, and then they joke like, Jeremy, we used to take advice from you when you're like 33 years old. I'm like, yeah, I'm a dummy. I have like a dog, no kids, a awesome wife. I'm fucking rich, like all these things. Like, yeah, it's easy for me to do and say, but when you really have like some real life stuff going on, you're battling all, and those things all factor into how fit you can be and what you look like and how much time you have and just your bandwidth in general. Like I say this a lot, like the only reason I can like still look this way. There's genetics and there's all that stuff. I go, but I literally created my own world here and I don't have to go anywhere. I don't have to like show up to an office I don't want to. I don't have to go to events. I don't have to do shit. I can do what I want, when I want, how I want, and I construct my day the way that I want to. Yes, it's still hard work. I go, but it all plays into kind of like my strengths where if you don't work in that same environment and you have 4 kids and you're going to 6 different kid events on the weekends and stuff, like I don't have that same, I don't want to call it baggage, but I don't have those same responsibilities that somebody else has. And so I don't have goldfish around my house like you probably do. Like I don't have to go to happy hours. Like I can kind of control everything. And that's a huge piece of everybody's success or not success. And everybody in fitness, like all the people that I know, like my close friends that if you want to say like look a certain way, like look extreme, if you will, like whether it's, the BJ's or the Hannahs, the Lexus, whoever, like they're freaks and we all kind of live it. And there's so much that goes into that. Like we get to control our environment and most people don't have the luxury of doing what we can do.
Totally, man. I'm happy you bring up just the exercise piece of this because this is one of the next questions I kind of wanted to chat with you about. And you kind of just alluded to it a little bit too, but one thing I just wrote down is like a lot of people start working out because of how they want to look or because they want to change the way they look. Like that's usually the impetus for change for a lot of people when it comes to exercise, nutrition, a lot of these things, right? Vanity driven goals. And you and I both are not up here saying like you shouldn't do that or that's a bad thing, but it absolutely can be part of it, but it's usually not the whole picture, right? Or if you don't challenge that or let other things be important to you, like it can kind of be a losing battle sometimes as you keep getting deeper into this. But what I've found personally as working with humans is a lot of people end up keeping their workout routine or they keep working out because how it makes them feel or how it plays into other areas of their life. Sure, it makes them look better, can improve health and blood markers, but man, it makes you feel really fucking good. It makes you feel like a badass. It makes you feel like you can do really cool, hard shit. And one of the questions that I sent to you and that I want to chat about is like, what are some things or some life lessons that you've seen in all your years of experience, whether it's you personally or you with clients, people you've seen come into the studio that you've trained with forever? Like, what are life lessons that you think people can learn or you help people look at, right? Because a lot of times as a coach or as a trainer, people can't see shit for themselves, right? So it's somewhat our job to help them look in different areas, right? Or help them see things that maybe they can't see. But is there things, maybe one or two or three things or whatever fucking things come to mind, but like, what do you think people can learn from like getting in, doing a Sunday Metcon, like whatever the case may be, that could actually help them improve their life in so many other ways aside from just the way we look and vanity driven goals that people might have?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's important. It's why it's why most of us start, because we want to. If you're a dude, you want to hook up with chicks, and if you're a chick, you want to hook up, or vice versa. If you're a dude who want to looks good for dudes, whatever your thing is, but we do it to hook up. I mean, we're fucking primates, dude. Like it's the oldest game in the books. But outside of that, most people, that's what gets them started. But once they're here, you really start to understand. Again, most people don't give a shit about their blood markers. Like people say they do, but they don't. It doesn't matter. Like that's not like you're on the assault bike, like, oh man, hope my cholesterol goes down. Like we don't, that's not how we talk and are motivated. What fitness does, like, and you touch on it for a second, like hard shit lets you do hard shit. And you can't control most of your day. But you can control your output. And you might be having a shit day and having 18 things go on, but like just showing up and doing something, uh, it does give you a little bit of juice to kind of go through the rest of your day. And when you look at like fitness in general, especially like in a group setting, sometimes a squat is just a squat, but oftentimes a workout is much more than that. There's people who come here and I don't know what they're carrying with them through their day. They might be coming from, they're going through a divorce, they just lost a job, maybe something's going on with their kids or one of their parents, and they come here and they don't want to fucking be here and they're just kind of going through the motions, but then they have a conversation with somebody else. And then they're joking and they're talking and they're moving and they're sweating. And so there's so much more than just like the physical fitness piece of it. There's like an emotional piece of fitness that comes into it. There's a community aspect to it. And that makes you a healthy person. And I really believe that. It's inside the gym's four walls. It's not just sets and reps. Like what we do here is much deeper than that. People have made like lifelong friendships here. There's people here that are on the verge of like, literally just, not being here as humans. And they come in and they have one or two conversations with somebody and it's like now they're back on track just because like this is their church, if you will. And I think community is a huge piece of what goes on here. And then once you're here long enough, it becomes not even routine. It's the discipline in what you do. You just become a fitness person, as we call it. Like you just show up and you put in the work. Whatever your 100% looks like that day, you just give it and you consistently are just here over time. And it becomes like where you can't not do it anymore. And then everything does start to change from that standpoint. Because as you get older, you realize like, wow, I do care about my blood markers, but it's not the driving factor. It's like, am I in pain? Can I get out of pain? Can I pick up my kids? Like, can I go hike and do fun shit? Can I ride a bike? Like, can I take my skills that I acquired in the gym and apply them to something fun that's outside the gym? And can I, just kind of keep up the pace that I have at, 37? Can I do the same things at 67? So none of that has to do with what you look like. And I would say for most people, like on Sunday here for us specifically, it's the only day I do train with them. And even though like we don't talk during the workout because it's so fucking awful, other than like some random swear words, there's a camaraderie there with those people. And there's a certain level of respect I have for them that ranks higher than so many other people because they're willing to kind of show up here and do this awful shit like anybody else. It's the same thing when you look at like Ranger School or you look at people going through buds. It's like they try to break those guys and then they build this camaraderie with them. And there's that fitness is one of the only things that allows you to do that because typically at your job like on Microsoft Teams you don't have the same relationship because you're not doing the same shitty stuff with each other.
Yeah, totally, dude. Yeah, I think one thing that I heard from you say is just like, the mental resiliency that can come from like putting yourself through a bunch of hard shit, a bunch of gross shit all the time and consistently doing that. Just it's so impactful across everybody's kind of like life, whatever, however they want to individualize that to them. It can impact everybody at the same level. But man, like consistently showing up, doing the hard work, like bringing yourself to like make yourself uncomfortable in a controlled environment in the gym in a way that's like low key kind of building your body up. Like, of course, physically, you'll see a lot of really cool adaptations. A lot of cool things happen because of that. Obviously, you listened a lot of just like ADLs, right? And fucking going on a hike or hiking camelback when you want, or being able to like not have fucking back pain picking up the groceries when you're 62, when you're coming back home from grocery shopping or whatever. It's like those are all things ideally we want to be independent, mobile, strong as fuck so we can have a good quality of life as we continue to get older. I think that's an obvious one. I think that's a reason why a lot of people really do keep working out. But man, for a lot of people, if the only thing that you get from working out is changing the way you look, like I'd argue that you've completely missed the point of working out in the first place. You're missing out on all the other incredible shit that can happen when, you actually work up and you do that consistently for a period of time. And we're not talking about just doing a 30-day program and then not lifting for the last, 11 months of the year, right? Like showing up consistently, building into your routine, doing it when it's hard. Of course, you're going to have different seasons of your life where you can put more or less effort into, but it's the act of you showing up a lot of times when you don't want to that just puts another drop in this big ass bucket of what you're doing for yourself throughout the course of the week that future you will likely be able to thank you for one day. And I can't help but remember, I feel like everybody, your clients and people who listen to this podcast are going to be like, yeah, going in on Sundays, like I sit in the parking lot, I'm like, why the fuck am I here? Right. And when they get done with that Metcon or whatever, it's like, I'm really happy I showed up. There's a community. I feel good. Like I can enjoy my endorphins and then go watch football or whatever the fuck later in the day. But if I can bring my own personal experience into this, it's like, I've done mostly hypertrophy training for the last 2, 3 years now, but I've trained 4 days a week. I had day 3, notoriously is just my worst day. It's the Thursday. I always just fuck myself up that day. But on this particular program, my day 3 it was like a ham curl straight into hack squats with a pause at the bottom into front foot elevated reverse lunges with a quarter rep. And then after that, I did some like calf raises or something like that. But every time I would go to the gym, I'd sit in the parking lot, I'd look at my program, I'd listen to music, whatever. I just like I would just sit there for 4 minutes, 5 minutes. I'd be like, damn, am I really going to go do this right now? But it was me bringing myself up to that, me understanding that, yeah, this might suck in the moment, but it's a week from now. It's next week when I go up on my hack squat or I add 2.5 pounds, right? Or when I get another rep. It's like there's always something that kept bringing me back. And I wouldn't know what that was until I actually did that, or unless I actually did that in the first place. And you do that for a month, for 2 months, for 3 months, right? Like whatever type of workout class you're doing, like chances are you're not going to want to do that shit all the time. But every time you do that, every time you say yes when you want to say no, that is an investment back into yourself. It's just another thing that you can put into this, again, this big bucket, right? That we're trying to fill up over our lifespan of things you're doing for yourself and things that future you is going to benefit from. And guess what? That shit made it easier for me to invite people on the show or to do public speaking events or to be able to like say no in social situations when everyone's drinking and it's like, no, I'm on a cut right now and I'm having my calories. It's like it gives you permission, it gives you the power to actually make more pro health decisions after the fact, right? It's not always what happens in the moment that you get the most benefit from. And I know everyone else can resonate with that, but I wanted to share my own experience because I have all of those. I know you have those similar experiences as well, but it's like when you start to actually think about it, you realize like how impactful this shit actually is. So it's just kind of fun, but that shit you can't learn anywhere else. And I think the gym is one of the best things, one of the best resources and tools that we have as humans to be able to just build our physical strength, but also our mental strength at the end of the day.
Yeah, and for you guys who are listening, if you're, as you get older, and if you can't talk yourself into doing like whatever the program says, just go and do something. Like, what can you talk yourself into doing? And that's for a lot of you, it doesn't even matter what it is. It's just the act of doing something and showing up. So there's days where, like, yeah, we all do it. The fittest people in the world. And again, I have the luxury of working in a space where no one else is here. I can control everything. I can buy any piece of equipment I ever want. And there's still days where I'm like, fuck, I don't want to do this. I go, but what can I do? Like, what am I willing to do for the next 30 minutes that I can just come in, sweat, move my body through space? And oftentimes, like, you end up waking up somewhere in between there and actually having a great workout, and you can live to kind of train another day. I think for most people, the consistency of just doing something is always better than doing absolutely nothing. Like, for even if you're having the most shit day, dude, can you just go for a walk for a couple minutes? Can you get in the pool? Can you do a ruck? Can you do a couple push-ups and a couple squats and just be married to that? And so that's a huge part of it too. Like, obviously talking yourself into doing what you're supposed to do is amazing, but there's days where sometimes maybe you struggle and you can't, but just show up and do something. Those are the days that to me compound and make the biggest difference. Versus, 'cause again, when life is great, your wife gives you a compliment, like the sun is shining, you got your perfect music on, you think you look like fucking Rambo. Yeah, it's easy to go train, dude. But when your boss is giving you shit, you got 18 problems at home, like your back hurts and you got to go in and like, do split squats, it's a little bit tougher. It's a little bit tougher ask. So on those days, just go in and do something, man. Like those are the days that pay off.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just kind of with that, just another life lesson is just like absolving yourself of perfection and like being okay with like kind of taking some imperfect action, right? And this idea that you doing something is still infinitely better than doing nothing. Man, it's something that I feel like a lot of people, and again, not to sit here and mansplain thing to people or act like we're fucking therapists, but man, this perfectionist mentality that people have in a lot of areas of their life that can really express a lot with their nutrition, with their body, with their obsessions, with what they do and what they look like, but also with their fitness. And people who miss a workout for the day, right? Or who go in and they couldn't match the same reps, or they didn't beat the last time they had on the last Sunday Metcon or whatever, and you get in your head about it, it's like, man, doing that and actually being okay with not having everything be perfect all the time, I find is something that I don't know, can just be really helpful as we do other shit too. Because perfectionism, man, it's well, you've probably said it, right? It's the enemy of progress or whatever the quote is there, but like there's so many things that just doing something, like you said, can teach you, and being okay with not being perfect that day. And again, how that can like lead to a better mindset going forward, even out and around your fitness and your relationship and your work with whatever you decide to do every day. But man, like going in and doing 10 split squats instead of 15, like that's something that, yeah, you could be proud of at the end of the day. So no one goes into a workout usually and feels, like it was a waste of time, right? Like when people make a good nutrition decision, when they drink less, when they go in and get a workout, like most people don't look back and be like, I regret doing that. Like, you're going to feel good doing that, but I just don't want people to feel like they have to do it perfectly every time. And again, like you said, that's where that shit compounds over time, but it's really hard to see that because it's not something that you always physically see happen or even mentally see. But man, you do that for a year, you're a fucking changed human being at the end of that time frame.
Yeah, I just tell people if you want to compare it to something like finance, right? Like if your goal was to save $100 a week every week, and maybe 1 month things went sideways and you could only save $50 a week every week, would you just decide, well, I can't save 100, so fuck it, I'll save zero? Like, no, you still invest the 50. And that's really like what your fitness is. This all or nothing mentality, it's the thing that kills people probably the most, especially with nutrition stuff, because it's like, hey, I woke up and I ate pancakes and had mimosas, so I just need to eat like shit the rest of the day. It's like most people do that, sadly, but it doesn't mean you have to eat. like shit for lunch and dinner. Although I do think it is tough to, if you wake up, and I'm not a mimosa person, but if that's what you do and you have six of them, odds of you getting a great workout in later in the day is probably fucking zero. But just know you can still eat better and you can still move around even if you do that. So it's just like try to get outside of the perfection and all or nothing mentality. And it's like I'm a huge fan of just something is always better than nothing, and it will compound over time, and it will pay you off even if it doesn't feel like it up front.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely. Do you have time for one more question? 10 more minutes?
Sure. Yeah.
Cool. I think it's only right to finish the podcast with kind of how we started, which is talking about, your partner, your spouse, who your support system is. We again, congratulations on, expecting a child coming in here this next year. But man, I know you've alluded to this a couple times already. You're a big fan. You talk about her a lot, but having Heather as who is your wife, as a partner, as a support system, as somebody that shares interests as you, as somebody who's allowed you to do all these things, as somebody who's believed in you in the very beginning. Like again, when we talk about things that we have control over, we can pick who we fucking have as a partner, right? But you can't always control those people. So finding good people and surrounding yourself with them is very important. But I find, as somebody who has nutritionally worked with a lot of people, help them kind of revamp their health and fitness and walking regimen and starting to do things differently and improving their health. Like one of the biggest barriers that I find personally as a coach, especially with people who are like over the age of 30, is a non-supportive partner. It's not like an outward non-support, but it's like an inability for them to buy in, or an inability for other people to change what they're doing, maybe in the moment, right? And a lot of times people, when they start working towards better health and fitness, of course, if you can have a partner, if you have a spouse, or if you have a best friend or your mom, somebody to do it with, I think that could be great. It can increase the likelihood. And again, we're not saying that you have to rely on other people for your success, but you bet your fucking ass that having a good social circle, having a support, person next to you, just not having fucking dementors in your life, like that's going to improve the likelihood of how successful you are in the beginning, but how likely you are to sustain that success over the lifespan as well. And I say all of this because I know you've been vocal of it before, and I have too, where it's like, I'm the luckiest man in the world because I have a wife who's allowed me to do my own thing, and who is, been okay with me, kind of being a psychopath with my health and fitness and my nutrition. And sure, her allowing me to do that, her not partaking in it all the way, right? Because that's not her life. She has her own shit, but doing it at her own capacity. But it's been easier for me because I haven't had that resistance in the house or with friends. And I know you feel similarly in that sense. But when it comes to having a supportive partner at home, one of the questions that I have for you, or one of the things that I want to talk about, is like, how can we help people navigate, at least in the beginning, a partner who isn't supportive, a partner who isn't on the same, page as that person, right? Still loves them or not. Like, and again, there's unique situations where like your client, he's on a second or third divorce or whatever. Like, yeah, there's things that you could do to take care of that. But practically speaking, it's like, how do you help somebody when they don't have help at home, right? And of course, that's kind of our responsibility. They're asking for help because maybe they haven't been able to do it on their own. So we have some level of accountability and information and guidance that we can give to them that they can feel support on too. But I'm curious if there's like things that you've found personally, or with clients, or stories that you've heard, or things that you've seen in your practice with like, hey, how do we help people who don't have a super supportive environment at home? How do we help them change that? Or how do we help them just guide them, knowing that they might not be able to do everything in their own capacity without the help of other people in their life?
It's a tough one for people, especially as you age with other people. So if you met your spouse like earlier in life and you both used to go out to the bar and, tear it up, and as you get older, one of you stops doing that, but one of you continues to do that. And then you're expecting your partner to change drastically because you're changing, which I don't think is fair to your partner either. Now, if you come from a standpoint of I want you to be healthier, excuse me, and not drop dead, it's probably an easier sell. If you do it from a vanity standpoint, you're probably going to get, you know, a shitful in your ear. So there is that. So we have clients who've kind of done both across the board. At the end of the day, like you're not going to change someone else's mind. You're not going to change what they do. All you can do is just kind of live your life the best way you can and be the healthiest person you can be without being overbearing on them. It's the same way I think about people who are like, if you're super religious, like you can't get someone to, convert to what you do. If you're a Vikings fan, you're not going to get a Packers fan to come over and be on the team. It's just that's how the game goes. All you can do is tell them how awesome the Vikings are, and then the Packers suck, and hopefully they figure it out. I'm kidding, but the reality is, if you just keep living it and you're not overbearing about it, and you have to be that person. See, like that's who I am in my life. Eventually, you're going to, for lack of a better term, wear them down, and they're going to understand that I do have to eat better, and I can't keep doing this forever. But you also have to give them the grace of it's a hard change because it's not a skill. You're asking for behavior modification, which for most people is extremely difficult over time. And all you can do is present them kind of the best things that are out there. And if you're doing it from a place of like you want to be healthy and you want them to be healthy because you love them and you want them to be around, I think that's a much easier sell than anything kind of vanity driven. And if you frame it that way, most people are more susceptible to kind of rolling with you. But it is tough. I guess the one thing I would say is if you're not, kind of the alpha person in the house, I would ask them to, do their best to not keep things in sight that drag you down. So if you're a chocolate person or a wine person, ask them to like hide it as best they can. Like I know what Heather's things are. So I don't, they're not my things. So I don't buy them and put them in places where it would sabotage her and like vice versa. And she understands, and at first it is going to be an adjustment. Don't get me wrong. Like when I'm 26, competing in bodybuilding and doing all this really ridiculous, weird shit. Socially, it's a tough thing to do when all your friends are still going out boozing it up, and we live in Scottsdale, which is like the bachelorette fucking capital of the world. And, I'm going to a party drinking coffee and water looking like a fucking weirdo. I'm not going to say there was not arguments that went on early enough. I go, but over time, she's like, well, this is what he's doing for work. He's trying to do this weird thing and people don't understand it. And then eventually they do come around, but you're going to have to go through some arguments and you're going to have to kind of lose some battles. And there is no perfect answer, but just know like, hey, tell them you're being healthier. You want them to be healthier. And don't be so neurotic about it either. Like you can't go from like, hey, I was out boozing eating cheesesteaks at 2 a.m. to now it's like, I don't eat fucking seed oils and I never drink alcohol. Like if you go 0 to 100, you're going to leave them behind for sure. So there's a gradual kind of progression there. And no, even if you want to go hard, they don't have to go as hard as you, and vice versa. Like you're two unique individuals. But over time, if you can keep good things in the house, you're doing that person one of the best services you can do them, even if they don't realize it, obviously up front.
Yeah, no question, man. No question. I like how you mentioned like, yeah, not going from 0 to 100, like not being overly perfect or, neurotic about a lot of this stuff. Cause I think that could be a turnoff for people as well. But I think just the inclusion of people or just the communication around it's like, hey, this is what I'm choosing to do. This is why I'm doing it. This is why this is important to me. Man, if you have a partner, a supportive partner, and they hear that and they're like, oh yeah, oh that's dumb as fuck. It's like, yeah, like that's a very different conversation. But most of the time, man, the person you married, the person you're with, the person who you spend the most time with, like they're probably going to be pretty okay with that or accepting of that, whether they're ready to change or not. But it comes from having conversations about it and why you're doing it instead of you telling them that they have to do it with you or you telling them that you both have to change or I have to change or like you said just being overly neurotic about something and making it this super consequential decision. It's like, man, easing into it and understanding why someone's doing it and just getting on the same page about it, whether they do it or not, like they're going to be more likely to be supportive with you in that sense. They're going to be more likely to be like, yeah, you know what, it's X amount a month to go train with Jeremy every month, like absolutely go do that. If that improves your quality of life and it's important to you, it's like we can make time for that, right? Or maybe that makes them less likely to Uber Eats fucking, in and out at the end of the night when you come home from a busy day. It's like we got shit for tacos tonight. We're not going to order food, right? But maybe your old default setting was to do that. Like over time, it's like you're not going to change all of that at once, but it's just small deposits into the bank account every day. And before you know it, usually that partner, like you said, comes around or they're different than where they were in the beginning. And I think that's what most people can do is just lead by example, not shame people into doing things, not telling them what to do. Cause like you said, about if we know anything about behavioral research, it's like people telling other people what to do is not a effective way to invoke behavior change, right? So usually just creating an environment where it's easy for them to follow along or to kind of like do some of the hard work in the beginning, like you'll get that buy-in from that partner eventually. ideally, right? And if you don't, you guys grow farther apart and you realize that that's not an environment that's helpful for you. Like there's a reason divorce rates are over 50% these days, you know, like and again, this isn't a therapy session, but yeah, I find that.
But it is though, like when you guys are a team, like you can still eat different, like you can vote for different people, you can have different favorite football teams, like you can like and you can still be a unit. Like you can separate the two. Like if you're the healthy person, you also can't be super salty if your partner wants to eat pizza every fucking day. Like from a health standpoint, sure, I go, but if that's like tempting you, you have to be the one who has to resolve and not eat the pizza if that's the thing that drags you down and let them do their thing. Like at our house, and this is being transparent, I don't tell her shit and she doesn't tell me anything. Now, if you want to ask me to, hey, do you want, hey, will you wear this outfit and come to a pumpkin patch? I might do it if I'm going to be nice, but I'm a 41-year-old man. Is that something I want to fucking do? Like, absolutely not. I go, but there's compromise there and there's give and take. And so I'm not going to say, hey, Heather, you have to eat this. Like, are you out of your mind? Like, there, and again, as a man and a woman, like, there is a certain things like you can and can't say and there's things that they can and can't say. And you just kind of have to know that. And so if you operate from a standpoint of like we don't tell each other what to do, we just make suggestions to make their life better. And if they choose to take them, cool. I think that's a good place to kind of operate from.
Yeah, I love that example. You know, I had a client, nurse practitioner, lovely lady, you know, substantial amount of weight to lose. We started working with each other. I didn't talk to the husband once. We worked together, I think, for 9 months or so. And at the end of our coaching or at the end of our time together, uh, she told me on the last call, she's like, "Oh, by the way, my husband lost 30 pounds since I started working with you." And a lot of that was, and again, if we talk about differences between men and women, it's like,
Cheers to being a dude.
yeah, bro. I think that says more about like, oh, the fact that this lady stopped buying full sugar Red Bulls and started drinking them around the house and got diet, and they just made some small tweaks, and she just had more fresh produce and more stews and whatever, you know, at home for the day. It's like a dude, unfortunately or fortunately, can lose weight or just see a lot more instant results compared to women, especially like middle-aged women, right? And a lot of these things. But moral of the story was like, yeah, her just changing her actions also had an indirect but a direct impact on the partner as well. And you'll find that a lot of people can notice that. And honestly, that buy-in can come in a lot quicker too, where it's like, hey, this felt a little bit more effortless, because I think a lot of people get scared of like, am I going to have to never eat pizza again? Right. Because I think when we think about nutrition, we think about health. It's like, fuck, I got to train 5 days a week and I have to eat clean all the time. And I always have to abide by these rules. When you realize it's like, no, motherfucker, there's a spectrum that we're existing on. And instead of you being turned up all the time, it's like you at 75%, your body, your life, your decisions, like they look different, you know, but it doesn't have to be this 100 down to zero and then back to 100 again. And I find that people who usually start taking care of their own shit, it leads their partner to also take care of their shit as well, whether it's spoken about or not, right? There's kind of these unwritten rules sometimes you can say or do in the household. Ideally, Katie and I are very similar to everything you just said, where it's like, what do you want me to wear? Like, I'm not going to die on this hill. Don't get me wrong. But like, you know, when we go out to dinner tonight, it's like, no, I'm going to order this and I'm not going to eat dessert or whatever it is. And there's a mutual respect there. But there's things that if it's important enough for you, you're going to make it important in your life. And then the people who are also important to you are likely going to change some of their actions, their behaviors, the conversations around that, and meet you at a spot instead of being fucking oil and water all the time. So
Yeah, there's no argument your partner can make over decades of eating right is a bad decision and is somehow going to hurt your family and your health. It's like the saying strength is never a weakness, weakness is never a strength. And it's you're acquiring a new skill that just makes you a better all-around person. And even if they don't try, like eventually like they'll come around. It may not be fully, but eventually they'll get close to you.
for sure. For sure. Also, the fact that like being more fit in life is so much more fun than being unhealthy, being sick, you know. And again, a lot of people maybe learn that. And it's a very nuanced conversation. It's a very privileged conversation to have. But it's one of those things where if you can take action on things before shit happens, before there's relationship complications, before there's high blood pressure diagnosis, before you have pre-diabetes, it's like, man, like that's what we're sitting here and telling people. We're always going to be advocates for like, take care of your shit now. So old you doesn't have to take care of the stupid ass decisions that young you made for 20 years of your life. And if there's anything, even just listening to this conversation, if that's an impetus for like, you know what? No, I'm not going to fucking binge drink every weekend for the rest of this year. If that's a positive action that somebody can make from this, episode or however it applies to their life, like I feel like we do our job, and it's making these small dents, these small impacts on people day to day, month to month. And you as the partner, you as the person who's changing your health and fitness, it's the same shit, right? It's like you're being a role model for people in your life. And man, before you know it, 3 months, 6 months, a year go by, like you're going to be unrecognizable, but the people in your life are also going to benefit from it as well. So you're making an impact far greater than what you're doing for yourself. But as long as you're doing it for yourself at the end of the day, you're going to find success.
Yeah, for most people, I think if you're a partner, like you don't want to be the reason your other half is not successful. Like that would be the worst thing if my wife came to me and said, "Hey man, the reason that I suck at my job or the reason I'm not fit or the reason is because you're fucking dragging me down." Which at the end of the day, it's always on you. I go, but I would rather be, a fire, to the flame, not like pissing on it and putting it out. Like I want to be the number one cheerleader if I can be with anything. And I think most people out there would be the same.
Absolutely, dude. Last question I have for you, and I'll let you go. I want to be respectful of your time. Is what do you got on Sam Darnold right now? How do you think the rest of the year is going to play out? What's kind of
The
the
game is on right now,
is
right
it?
here. It's 14-10 Detroit with
Yeah,
30 seconds left. At Minnesota. Honestly, man, they're good overall. I mean, like, are they, if I'm talking like legit, are they Chiefs good? See, the Chiefs are legit. Baltimore looks legit too. I'm a Vikings fan like for my entire life, and so if you're not from there, it's hard for me to describe this. It's like when you watch like the prime Patriots and they could be down like 21 in the fourth quarter, you still felt like Brady and those guys would pull some out of their ass and win. Like you just always, it's like how I like remember watching the Bulls as a kid. I always thought like Jordan would win. I'm like the Bulls are always going to win no matter what. It's just like the Bulls are going to win the championship. And with the Vikings and being a Minnesota fan, it's almost the opposite. Like we could be 15 and 0 and Gary Anderson is just going to make every field goal all year. And then one year he's just going to miss the last field goal of the year. And we're going to lose to the Falcons and not go to the Super Bowl. And then the Rams will win. Like I lived through that, so it's fun to watch. Like it's cool when they're good. They're probably going to lose today. And that's the thing too, like with Sam Darnold, he's younger than Joe Burrow, which is fucking crazy to say. And people wrote him off as like he's washed up, he's a has-been, he sucks. Again, bring this full circle, circumstance and timing matters in life and it matters in the NFL. Like if you get on a shitty team in a shitty system, it's tough, dude. But if you get on a good team with the best guys, like I'm not saying Tom Brady isn't amazing. I go, but if he ends up on the Cleveland Browns and not the Patriots, I don't think we're talking about him in the same way today. It's like you got to have the pieces around you. So the Vikings are fun right now. The playoffs, yes, they'll make. Do I think they'll win the Super Bowl? I don't know if they're that good, but hey, if they get a couple unfortunate breaks other places, maybe we get there.
totally. Yeah, just got to pray for the health of like JJ and just the weapons you got. I think who Hawkinson or whoever gets to come back here soon too. So who knows? They might be a 1 or 2 seed for all you know, which would be
And
cool.
the matchups too, like if football is so huge, like any sport though, it's like the matchups. Like so if you get if you hit a streak at the right time, right place, like it's cool. Or if you run into like just this buzz saw, it's like it gets tough. Like I remember when they played, when the Eagles played them, Nick Foles turned into fucking Joe Montana for a game, had like 400 yards. Not that the Eagles weren't good, but if Nick Foles doesn't turn into Joe Montana, we win that game. And then all of a sudden, no offense, where did Nick Foles go after that? Like he disappeared. It's like he just showed up one day and said, "I'm going to put fucking Superman's cape on and be amazing." And so that's what a Minnesota fan, has to deal with too.
Well, coming from a Raiders fan or somebody who roots for the Raiders, I know the feeling all too well. Maybe even worse in certain contexts. But yeah, it's fun. It's cool to have football and everything on in the background. This time of the year. I'm more of a basketball fan, so seeing the NBA season come up and all the restructuring of just different conferences and stuff, it's gonna be a cool basketball season. But just a lot of good times this time of the year outside of training, shorter days. It's like sports can make up for that sometimes when you got some good games on. So
Oh yeah, escapism is healthy, you guys. Maybe don't sit in front of the TV 8 hours a day, but you can watch a game. Like do some mobility while you watch it. You'll be all right.
totally, man. Totally. Well, thank you so much, dude. I could talk to you for another fucking 2 hours, but we'll end it here. I appreciate your time, bro. Tell the people where they can find you. I know you got an app. I think you got a mastermind for actual coaches. Just like plug anything and everything. I'll add everything to the show notes as well, but tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, it's not super creative. It's Jeremy Scott Fitness across the board. It's the website. We're on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, LinkedIn, pretty much every platform we exist on. We post on them all day long. Some of them are different. And then, yeah, obviously we have an app and we do work with other coaches who kind of, I don't want to say do what we do, but we do help people build a service-based business from the ground up. And it's not rocket science, and I can't promise anybody anything, but if you come into it and you work your ass off, like you can make money and survive on your own without working in corporate America, if that's ever your job. Again, it is hard work, but we cut the learning curve in half for people. I wish, like when I was younger, there would have been a thing where I could have been part of it, or maybe I probably couldn't have afforded it, even if there was a thing. But that would be it. And I would tell it to anybody. If you want to do something in your life in general, um, when you look to people for inspiration, that's cool. But you'd be surprised, like when you reach out to people in the world now who's willing to talk to you. And if there's somebody doing what you want to do, just reach out and ask them. You might not even know what questions to ask, but they'll be often more than not like open to reciprocating and giving you guys just open advice. And so if you want to get into real estate or insurance or you want to get into tech or whatever it may be, like just follow the people who are doing what you want to do and reach out and ask questions. You'd be surprised. Like that can cut the learning curve in half for a lot of you. And fitness is the obviously the exact same way. So
Totally. Kind of how this podcast came to fruition and you and I getting to shoot the shit today. As I just sent you a cold DM and you never know what people are going to say, but usually the real ones and the good people are going to return the favor that they had, returned at them at one point. And ideally I get to carry that on in the future too. So thank you for being such a good role model, bro. I appreciate you and everything that you've done for the fitness space. And this was a fun episode, man. I appreciate all your knowledge.
thanks, dude. I appreciate having me.